My name is Frank Morrison, and I'm 71 years old. I spent 43 years working as a mechanical engineer for various manufacturing companies, designing components that went into everything from cars to medical equipment. I saved aggressively, invested wisely, and built a life that allowed me to retire comfortably at 68 with a modest pension and substantial assets. My son Jason is 34. He works in marketing for a tech startup, makes decent money, and lives in a luxury apartment complex in the downtown district with his wife Amanda and their soon-to-arrive first child. They have expensive taste, designer furniture, and a lifestyle carefully curated for Instagram. I'd been living with them for 6 months, ever since I sold my house after my wife Margaret died. The grief had been overwhelming, and Jason had insisted I move in temporarily while I figured things out. I'd agreed, thinking maybe it would help to be around family, to have purpose again, to feel less alone in the massive emptiness Margaret's death had created. I should have known better. The day everything changed started with a piece of mail. My monthly pension statement, forwarded from my old address, sitting on the kitchen counter where Jason had opened my mail, and apparently felt entitled to have opinions about the contents. I came downstairs that Tuesday morning to find Jason standing in the kitchen, my pension statement in his hand, reading it with the kind of expression people reserve for particularly disappointing restaurant reviews. "Morning," I said, heading for the coffee pot. "Dad." Jason's voice had that edge to it, the one he'd developed in his 20s when he'd decided he knew better than everyone about everything. "We need to talk about your financial situation." I poured coffee slowly, buying time, already knowing this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "My financial situation is fine, Jason." "Really? Because according to this," he waved the pension statement, my personal financial document that he had no right to open, "you're bringing in $200 a month." "Dad, that's nothing. That can't even buy groceries these days. You're basically living off charity at this point." Amanda appeared in the doorway, 8 months pregnant, wearing designer maternity wear that probably cost more than my entire month's pension. She didn't say anything, just stood there with her arms crossed, a slight smirk on her face that suggested she and Jason had already discussed this, had already decided I was a burden. "I have other income," I said quietly. "The pension isn't everything." "Other income?" Jason laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "What other income?" "Dad, you sold your house 6 months ago. Where's that money going?" "Because you're sure as hell not contributing anything here." "Jason." "No, let's be real about this. Amanda and I have been supporting you for half a year. We gave you the guest room, we feed you, we pay the utilities you use, we're carrying you financially. And your pension, your $200 a month, that's supposed to be your contribution? That doesn't even cover your food costs." Amanda finally spoke, her voice sweet but with steel underneath. "Jason, maybe we should discuss this more privately. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. But Jason was on a roll now, emboldened by perceived righteousness, by the belief that he was finally addressing an uncomfortable truth. "No, Amanda. Dad needs to hear this. He needs to understand that we can't keep doing this." "Keep doing what?" I asked, my coffee forgotten on the counter. "Supporting dead weight." The words came out flat, matter of fact, as if he were simply stating an obvious truth rather than calling his father a burden. "You're 71, Dad. Your earning potential is gone. Your pension is a joke. And we have a baby coming in 4 weeks. We need that guest room you're in. We need to convert it into a nursery." "I can look for my own place," I said. "With what money? You've been here 6 months and you haven't even mentioned looking for apartments. I think you've gotten comfortable. I think you plan to just stay here indefinitely, living off us, contributing your pathetic little pension while we carry the real financial burden." Amanda put her hand on Jason's shoulder. "Honey, your tone—" "My tone is fine. Someone needs to say this. Someone needs to tell him the truth." Jason stepped closer to me, his face flushed, his voice rising. "The truth is you're an old man with no real income living in our apartment, eating our food, using our electricity and water and internet. You're a financial liability, and we need you to leave." The kitchen went silent. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised alone after Margaret's first cancer scare when he was 12, the teenager I'd paid for braces and college prep courses and eventually 4 years of private university, the young man I'd helped with his first apartment deposit and car down payment and a dozen other expenses over the years. And I saw a stranger, a cruel stranger who'd apparently been building resentment for months while smiling to my face. "You want me to leave?" I said, not a question, a statement of fact. "Yes, start packing. We need your room in 2 weeks. That gives you time to find somewhere else." Somewhere else with $200 a month, I said. That's what you think I have to work with. That's what you have to work with. It's not our fault you didn't plan better for retirement. It's not our fault you only have a tiny pension. You made your choices, Dad. Now you get to live with them, just not here. I looked at Amanda, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Looked at Jason, who stood there with my pension statement in his hand like it was evidence in a trial where I'd already been found guilty. Okay, I said quietly. I'll be out in 2 weeks. Jason blinked, apparently surprised I wasn't arguing. Okay, that's it? No guilt trip about how we're abandoning you? Would it matter if I did? He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. No, it wouldn't. This is a practical decision, Dad. Nothing personal. I picked up my coffee and walked past them both, heading back to the guest room. The room that was apparently so urgently needed that my son couldn't wait 2 more weeks to kick me out. As I closed the door, I heard Amanda whisper, "That went better than expected." And Jason's response? He knows he doesn't have any other options. Where else is he going to go on what $200 a month? I sat on the bed in that guest room in the apartment building I owned, drinking my coffee, and smiled for the first time in 6 months. Jason had never been particularly curious about my life or work. Even as a child, he'd been more interested in his own activities, his own friends, his own world. That was normal for kids, and I'd never pushed him to take an interest in mechanical engineering or property investment or any of the things that fascinated me. But somewhere along the way, his lack of curiosity had hardened into assumptions. He'd decided, without ever asking, that I was just a regular working man who'd retired with a modest pension. He'd looked at my practical clothes, my old truck, my simple lifestyle, and concluded I was poor. He'd never asked about the properties. Never wondered where the house down payment money had come from when he'd asked for help at age 26. Never questioned how I'd paid for his private university education without student loans. He just accepted everything I provided as his due and never looked deeper. The truth was more complicated. I'd started investing in real estate in my 30s when Margaret and I bought our first rental property, a small duplex in a neighborhood that was just starting to gentrify. We'd saved every spare dollar, lived modestly, and used the rental income to save for the next property. By the time Jason was born, we owned 4 properties. By the time he graduated high school, we owned 12. And by the time Margaret died 3 years ago, we'd built a portfolio of 37 units across 5 buildings, all generating steady rental income. Margaret had managed the properties. She'd been the organized one, the one who enjoyed dealing with tenants and maintenance requests and lease renewals. After she died, I'd hired a property management company to handle the day-to-day operations. I'd been too grief-stricken to deal with tenant calls and repair emergencies. The apartment building where Jason lived was one of mine, a beautiful historic building I'd purchased 15 years ago and renovated extensively, transforming it from outdated and run-down into luxury downtown living. 18 units total, currently valued at approximately $3.5 million according to the latest appraisal. Jason's apartment was Unit 12, a corner 2-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, updated kitchen, in-unit washer and dryer, access to the rooftop terrace. Market rate, $2,800 per month. Jason paid $2,200 per month, a family discount I'd approved when he and Amanda had first applied 4 years ago. The property management company knew Unit 12 was my son's apartment and had standing instructions to keep his rent below market rate. He'd never asked why his rent was so reasonable compared to comparable units in the building. Never questioned his good fortune, just assumed he'd found a great deal through his own savvy apartment hunting. I'd let him think that. Had let him believe whatever made him happy. Because I'd learned from Margaret that some gifts are best given quietly, without expectation of recognition or gratitude. But that philosophy only works when the recipient has basic respect for the giver. Sitting in that guest room, listening to Jason and Amanda discuss how they'd converted into a nursery, how they'd finally gotten rid of the old man burden, I pulled out my phone and made a call. Frank Morrison for Tom Chen, please. Tom Chen was my property attorney, a sharp guy I'd been working with for over a decade. He'd handled all my property acquisitions, drafted my leases, advised me on tenant law, and generally made sure I stayed on the right side of regulations while maximizing my investments. Frank, how are you? How's Jason? That's actually why I'm calling, Tom. I need you to prepare some documents for me. What kind of documents? A rent increase notice for Unit 12 at the Riverside Complex. Tenant Jason Morrison. I want it raised from $2,200 to $3,300 per month, effective in 30 days as required by law. There was a long pause. Frank, that's your son's apartment. I'm aware. A $1,100 monthly increase is significant. That's a 50% jump. Are you sure you want to do this? Completely sure. And Tom, I want it processed through the management company as a standard market rate adjustment. No mention that the owner specifically requested it. Just frame it as bringing Unit 12 in line with comparable units in the building. Frank, what's going on? This doesn't sound like you. I told him about the pension statement, about Jason's speech, about being called dead weight and told to leave in 2 weeks. Tom was quiet when I finished. Then, Jesus, I'm sorry, Frank. That's rough. It is what it is. Can you prepare those documents? I can. But I have to tell you, once you do this, there's no taking it back. Your relationship with Jason will be permanently damaged. Tom, my relationship with Jason is already damaged. He just doesn't know it yet because I've been too polite to tell him. This isn't about revenge. This is about my son learning what things actually cost when you don't have a father subsidizing your lifestyle. All right, I'll have the rent increase notice ready by tomorrow. It'll go out through the management company with all the proper legal language about market rate adjustments and tenant rights. Jason will get it in the mail within a few days. Perfect. And Tom, one more thing. I need you to draft a formal notification letter informing all tenants that the property ownership has been restructured, but that I remain the principal owner. Include my name prominently. I want every tenant in that building to know exactly who owns it. That's unusual. Most landlords prefer anonymity. Most landlords aren't trying to teach their son a lesson about assumptions and respect. Tom chuckled darkly. This is going to be interesting. I'll have everything ready for your signature tomorrow. After I hung up, I sat in that guest room, Jason's future nursery, and thought about all the times I'd helped my son without acknowledgement, all the times I'd provided without expectation, all the quiet sacrifices Margaret and I had made to give him opportunities we'd never had. And I thought about him standing in that kitchen, waving my pension statement, calling me dead weight. Something Margaret used to say came back to me. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone experience the consequences of their cruelty. I'd always thought that was harsh. Now I understood exactly what she meant. I spent the next week looking at apartments online, making phone calls, viewing studios and one-bedrooms that rented for $1,200 or less. The amount Jason believed was my entire monthly income. They were all terrible. The first place I viewed was a studio basement apartment in a neighborhood where 3 cars on the street had broken windows and 2 houses had boarded up windows. The landlord, a man who smelled like cigarettes and wore a stained undershirt, showed me a space that was maybe 350 square feet total. The kitchen was a hot plate and a mini fridge. The bathroom had black mold climbing the walls and a toilet that ran constantly. $950 a month, he said. First, last, and security deposit. Cash only. I'll think about it, I lied. The second place was a 1-bedroom on the 4th floor of a building with no elevator. The apartment itself wasn't horrible, small but functional, but the hallway smelled like marijuana and urine. Someone had spray-painted gang tags in the stairwell. The front door to the building didn't lock properly. The landlady, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, seemed embarrassed as she showed me around. It's not fancy, she admitted, but it's $100 a month, includes water and trash. Heat and electric are separate. How much typically for utilities? Winter? Could be $200, $300 a month, depending on how cold it gets. Building insulation isn't great, so really $400 a month. Still technically affordable on Jason's assumed budget for me, but barely. The third place I viewed was actually dangerous. The neighborhood was known for drug activity. The building had bars on all the ground floor windows. The apartment itself had cigarette burns in the carpet, holes punched in the walls that had been poorly patched, and a pervasive smell that suggested the previous tenant had kept pets they weren't supposed to have. $1,000 a month, the landlord said, a man who did the bare minimum of property maintenance and clearly didn't care about his tenants' quality of life. You pay first month and security, you can move in this weekend. I took photos of each place. Detailed photos showing the conditions, the neighborhoods, the reality of what $200 or less rented in this city, and I sent them to Jason. The first apartment, basement studio, $950 month, mold in bathroom, broken window locks, neighborhood with frequent police activity. The second apartment, 1-bedroom, 4th floor walk-up, $100 plus utilities. Building security door doesn't lock, smells like marijuana in hallways. The third apartment, 1-bedroom, $1,000 month, bars on windows, previous tenant damage. High crime area. Jason read every message. The little check marks appeared showing he'd seen them, but he never responded. Not once. No, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. No, maybe we should reconsider the timeline. No acknowledgement that his father was being forced to consider living in places that were borderline uninhabitable. just silence and read receipts. At home, Jason and Amanda had moved on completely. They'd already mentally converted my room into a nursery. Amanda came home one evening with paint samples, spreading them across the kitchen table while I sat there eating dinner. "I'm thinking something soft and calming," she said, holding up various shades of green and blue. "What do you think, honey, the sage green or the powder blue?" "I like the sage," Jason replied without looking up from his phone. "It's more modern, and it's gender neutral, which works since we're not finding out if it's a boy or girl." "Perfect. We can start painting the weekend after Dad moves out." She glanced at me briefly, then away, as if I were already gone. "I'm so excited to get the room set up. I've been looking at cribs online. There's this gorgeous convertible one that turns into a toddler bed later. It's $800, but it's an investment. $800 for a crib. More than half of what they thought was my total monthly income. They didn't see the irony. "How's the apartment hunt going, Dad?" Jason asked, his tone casual, as if he were inquiring about the weather rather than my housing crisis. "Challenging," I said. "Most places in my budget are in rough neighborhoods or poorly maintained." He scrolled through his phone. "Yeah, the rental market is tough these days. You'll find something, though." No offer to help. No suggestion that maybe they'd been hasty in their demands. Just a dismissive acknowledgement that, yeah, it's tough. Good luck with that. That evening I heard them in their bedroom discussing the nursery setup. "We should get a changing table, too," Amanda said, "and a rocking chair for nighttime feedings. Oh, and we need blackout curtains. The baby sleep consultant I follow on Instagram says darkness is crucial for establishing good sleep patterns." "How much is all that going to cost?" Jason asked. "Maybe $1,500 total, but we can spread it out over a few paychecks." "That's fine. We have the room in the budget now that we don't have to worry about Dad being here long term." The room in the budget. My absence had become a line item in their financial planning, a cost savings they could redirect toward baby furniture and sleep consultants. I lay in bed that night listening to them plan the life they'd build in the space I currently occupied, and I felt something harden inside me. Not just hurt or anger, something colder and more permanent. A realization that this relationship was fundamentally broken and had perhaps always been broken. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Wednesday afternoon, I met with Tom Chen at his office. He had the documents ready, both the rent increase notice and the ownership disclosure letter. "You're really doing this," Tom said, sliding the folders across his desk. "Last chance to change your mind." I pulled the folders toward me, started reading through them carefully. The rent increase was exactly as I'd requested. Notice of rent increase. "Dear Mr. Morrison, this letter serves as official notification that your monthly rent for Unit 12 at Riverside Complex will increase from $2,200 to $3,300, effective 30 days from the date of this notice. This adjustment brings your rent in line with current market rates for comparable units in the building and surrounding area. As you may be aware, similar two-bedroom corner units in downtown buildings currently rent for $3,200 to $3,500 per month. Per state law, we are providing 30 days advance notice of this change. Should you choose to vacate rather than accept the new rent amount, please provide proper notice as outlined in your lease agreement. If you have questions regarding this adjustment, please contact Chen Property Management. It was professional, legally airtight, and completely devastating if you were suddenly looking at a $100 monthly increase. The ownership disclosure was simpler but equally important. Property ownership notification. Dear Riverside Complex residents, this letter serves to inform all tenants of the current property ownership structure. Riverside Complex, 847-865 Harrison Avenue, is owned by Morrison Properties, LLC, with Frank Morrison as principal owner and landlord. This notification is being provided for transparency purposes. Your lease terms and conditions remain unchanged. All maintenance requests, rent payments, and tenant communications should continue to be directed to Chen Property Management. For questions or concerns, please contact Chen Property Management at phone number. Sincerely, Frank Morrison. Owner Morrison Properties, LLC. My name in bold. Impossible to miss. Official notification to all 18 units that Frank Morrison, the same name as Jason Morrison, the same man who'd been living in Unit 12 for the past 6 months, owned their building. The rent increase goes out tomorrow, Tom said. Jason should receive it by Friday. The ownership disclosure letters go out Monday, so all tenants should have them by Wednesday. Perfect timing. Frank, I have to ask one more time. Have you considered that this might permanently damage your relationship with your son? That he might never forgive you for this? He called me dead weight, Tom. He opened my private financial documents, made assumptions about my worth, and demanded I leave his home because I was a burden. The relationship was already damaged. I'm just deciding whether to keep pretending it wasn't. Tom nodded slowly. All right then. Sign here, here, and here. I signed all the documents. Tom witnessed and notarized them. It was done. No taking it back now. The consequences I'd set in motion would play out exactly as I'd planned. I spent Thursday boxing up more of my belongings, organizing decades of accumulated possessions into categories. Keep, donate, throw away. It was therapeutic in a way, this systematic dismantling of my life in Jason's apartment. Each box I packed was a step closer to freedom from his contempt. Jason came home from work early, found me in the living room surrounded by boxes. Moving day coming up? He asked with forced cheer. Saturday. Movers will be here at 9 a.m. That's great, Dad. Really great that you found a place so quickly. He didn't ask where, didn't ask if I needed help with the move, just expressed relief that I'd be gone on schedule. Did you want to see photos of the new place? I asked, testing whether he had any genuine interest. Oh, sure, if you want to show me. I pulled up photos on my phone, not the terrible apartments I'd viewed earlier, but the nice 2-bedroom I actually owned across town. Clean, modern, good natural light, safe neighborhood. Jason looked at the photos with visible confusion. This is really nice, Dad. How can you afford this on your pension? I told you, the pension isn't my only income. Right, but you never said what your other income was. You never asked. He looked uncomfortable. Well, I'm asking now. And you'll get your answer soon enough. Everything will become clear very shortly. He didn't push further, probably because he was already mentally preparing for my departure and didn't want to engage more than necessary. Friday morning, I woke to hear Jason on the phone in the kitchen. His voice carried through the apartment, rising with agitation. What do you mean the rent is increasing? By how much? Jesus Christ. 100? That's insane. No, I don't want to speak to a manager. I want this fixed. This has to be some kind of error. I stayed in my room, listening to him argue with the property management company, listening to them calmly explain that this was not an error, this was a market rate adjustment, this was completely legal and proper. Well, I want to know who approved this. Who owns this building? I don't care if it's policy. I want to speak to the actual owner. Fine. Send me the information. He slammed the phone down, or whatever the smartphone equivalent of slamming is. Probably threw it on the counter. Amanda's voice, worried. What happened? The rent. They're raising it to $3,300. What? How can they do that? Apparently it's legal. 30 days notice, market rate adjustment, blah, blah, blah. It's bullshit. Jason, we can't afford that. Not with the baby coming. I know. I heard them start to argue about budget cuts, about where they'd find an extra $100 per month, about whether this meant they'd have to move after all, and I sat in my room drinking my coffee, feeling absolutely nothing except cold satisfaction. Later that day, Jason knocked on my door. Dad, can I talk to you? Come in. He entered looking stressed, his hair disheveled, his tie loosened. The building management is raising our rent by a lot. How much? $100 a month. They're claiming market rate adjustment. That's substantial. Yeah. He laughed bitterly. It's almost 3 times your pension. 3 of your monthly checks just for our rent increase. Almost, I agreed, not correcting his math. 3 times $200 was $3,600, which was more than $100. But precision wasn't the point here. The point was that he was still using my supposed poverty as a measuring stick for financial pain. Anyway, we're trying to figure out what to do. We might have to cut back on some stuff, maybe not do the fancy nursery furniture we wanted, maybe eat out less. He paused, looking at me with something that might have been regret. I guess this is what happens in the real world, right? You can't always get what you want. No, I said. You can't. Are you sure you don't need any help with the move tomorrow? I could come by for a couple hours, help carry boxes. It was the first offer of assistance he'd made in 6 months. Too little, too late, and motivated by guilt rather than genuine care. I've hired movers, but thank you for offering. He left, and I returned to my packing, knowing that the next week would bring even more revelations than Jason was prepared for. That Monday morning, the ownership disclosure letters went out to all 18 units. I knew Jason would receive his by Wednesday, along with every other tenant in the building. And then the real reckoning would begin. Monday came with no acknowledgement that anything had changed. Jason went to work, Amanda had a doctor's appointment. I spent the day organizing my things, boxing up the possessions I'd brought when I moved in, preparing to leave as requested. I'd found an apartment, actually, a nice 2-bedroom in a building I owned across town, newer construction, good security, reasonable distance from my favorite restaurants and the library where I volunteered. Rent, $0 because I owned it. But Jason didn't need to know that yet. The ownership disclosure letters went out Monday as scheduled. They'd arrive Wednesday. Tuesday night, Jason and Amanda were subdued at dinner. The financial stress was clearly weighing on them. Amanda kept pulling up budget spreadsheets on her phone, calculating and recalculating, trying to find $1,100 a month in their expenses that could be cut. "We could drop the gym membership," she suggested. "That's $200 right there." "We need the gym," Jason replied. "Our health is important." "Then we cut streaming services. All of them." "Amanda, that's like $75 total. We need bigger cuts." "What about eating out? We spend at least $600 a month on restaurants." "So we just never go out anymore? Never have a nice meal? That's no way to live." "Well, what's your solution, Jason? Because we're $100 short every month now, and that money has to come from somewhere." I ate my dinner quietly, watching them realize what financial pressure actually felt like, watching them understand that lifestyle costs money, that choices have consequences, that you can't have everything you want just because you think you deserve it. Wednesday morning, I was reading in the living room when Jason burst through the door, home early from work, his face red and furious. "Dad!" His voice echoed through the apartment. "Living room, now." I set down my book calmly. "Is everything okay?" He stormed in holding a letter, the ownership disclosure from the property management company. "Is this some kind of joke?" "What is?" "This." He shoved the letter at me. "This letter saying that Frank Morrison is the owner of this building? That's your name, Dad. Is there another Frank Morrison who owns property, or is this you?" I took the letter, read it slowly, even though I'd written most of it. "Looks like it's me." "You?" His voice cracked. "You own this building?" "I own several buildings. This is one of them." Amanda appeared in the doorway, her hand on her pregnant belly, her face pale. "You own the building we live in?" "Yes." "How?" Jason demanded. "How could you possibly own a $3.5 million property? You have a $1,200 pension? You're poor. You can't even afford your own place, which is why you've been living here." "I never said I couldn't afford my own place, Jason. You assumed that, just like you assumed my pension was my only income, just like you assumed I was poor because I live simply. Then what else do you have? What's your real financial situation?" I looked at my son, the son who'd opened my pension statement, called me dead weight, demanded I leave in 2 weeks, and decided it was time for the truth. I own 37 rental units across 5 buildings in this city. Total portfolio value, approximately $12 million annual rental income after expenses, roughly $380,000. In addition to my pension, I receive about $31,000 monthly from property rentals. I'm not poor, Jason. I'm very comfortable. I just choose to live modestly because I learned a long time ago that real wealth is quiet. The living room went absolutely silent. Jason's mouth hung open. Amanda leaned against the doorframe like her legs might give out. 37 units, Jason whispered. "You own 37 rental units." "Yes." "And you let us think you were broke. You let me call you dead weight. You stood there while I told you your pension couldn't buy groceries, and you said nothing." "What would you have liked me to say, Jason? That I make more in a month than you make in a year? That I could buy your apartment building cash tomorrow if I wanted? Would that have made you respect me more, or would it just have changed the insults you used?" Amanda finally found her voice. "The rent increase. That was you." "That was the property management company bringing your rent in line with market rate, yes." "At your instruction," Jason accused. "I own the building. All rent adjustments ultimately come from me. But I didn't single you out, Jason. I simply removed the family discount I'd been giving you for 4 years. You're now paying what everyone else in comparable units pays." "Family discount?" He looked gutted. "We had a family discount this whole time?" "You were paying $600 less per month than market rate. Yes, that was a family discount. I approved it when you first applied, thought it would help you build savings, get established, prepare for the future, but apparently you interpreted my generosity as your good luck in finding a cheap apartment." Jason sank onto the couch, his face in his hands. "Oh my God. And now," I continued, my voice calm and steady, "you're paying market rate like everyone else. $3,300 a month, which is actually still reasonable for this location and these amenities. Other buildings nearby charge $3,600 for equivalent units." "We can't afford $3,300, Amanda said, tears starting to fall. "Not with the baby coming, not with all our expenses." "Then I suggest you make the same changes your father made when you were born. Cut unnecessary spending, prioritize needs over wants, learn to live within your means." "This is revenge," Jason said, looking up at me with something like hatred. "You're punishing us for asking you to move out. No, I'm removing a subsidy you never appreciated. There's a difference. You wanted me to leave because you thought I was a burden. I'm leaving as requested, but I'm also adjusting your rent to market rate, as is my right as a landlord. You don't get to keep the family discount while calling me dead weight. So that's it? Jason's voice was bitter. You're just going to make our lives miserable because we hurt your feelings? I'm going to treat you like any other tenant in my building, which is apparently more than you were willing to give me as your father. I stood up, headed back to my room. Behind me, I heard Amanda burst into sobs, heard Jason trying to comfort her while his own voice shook with shock and anger. Dad, wait, Jason called. We need to talk about this. We don't need to talk about anything. You have 30 days to decide if you want to pay the new rent or find another place. That's your choice. I'll be out of your apartment by this weekend, as requested. I closed my door on their protests, their questions, their belated attempts to negotiate, because some lessons can't be taught with words. They have to be learned through consequences. The next few days were tense and silent. Jason and Amanda barely spoke to me, and when they did, it was with icy politeness. They were furious, I could tell, furious at me for deceiving them about my wealth, furious at themselves for not knowing, furious at the situation they'd created by demanding I leave. Jason tried multiple times to get me to withdraw the rent increase. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Thursday evening, he cornered me in the kitchen. Dad, please, we need to talk about the rent situation. What about it? You know what about it. We can't afford $3,300 a month? Not right now. Not with the baby coming and all our expenses. You make $140,000 a year, Jason. Amanda makes $95,000. Combined income of $235,000 annually. You can afford $3,300 in rent. You just can't afford your current lifestyle plus that rent. We have expenses. We have car payments, student loans, insurance, groceries, utilities. Everyone has expenses. That's what budgets are for. You prioritize. You make choices. Easy for you to say. You own 37 rental units. You make more in a month than most people make in a year. I do now, yes. But I built that over 40 years of careful investing, modest living, and making sacrifices. Your mother and I lived in a 650 square foot apartment when you were born. We drove cars we bought used. We didn't eat out unless it was a special occasion. We saved every spare dollar and reinvested it. That's how wealth is built, Jason. Slowly, patiently, by not spending money on things you don't need. So what, you want us to live like that? In some tiny apartment, never enjoying our lives? I want you to live within your means. There's a middle ground between my early years and your current lifestyle. You just haven't looked for it because you've never had to. I've been subsidizing you, first with college, then with helping with your first apartment, then with below-market rent for 4 years. You've never actually had to support yourself at full market rates. Jason's face flushed red. That's not fair. I work hard. I earn my money. I never said you didn't. But earning money and managing money are two different skills. You earn well, you manage poorly, you spend everything you make plus the hidden subsidies I've been providing. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you teach me this stuff? I tried. When you were younger, I tried to talk to you about budgeting, about investing, about long-term planning. You weren't interested. You called it boring. You said you'd figure it out later. Well, later is now. He slammed his hand on the counter, making the coffee mugs rattle. I'm asking you, as your son, as the father of your grandchild, please reduce our rent back to what it was, or at least split the difference. Maybe $2,700 instead of $3,300. Something we can manage. No. Why not? What purpose does this serve except punishing us? I'm not punishing you. I'm removing a subsidy you never acknowledged or appreciated. There's a fundamental difference, Jason. Punishment would be raising your rent above market rate to hurt you. All I'm doing is charging you what everyone else pays. But we're not everyone else. We're family. Family. I looked at him directly. Jason, you called me dead weight. You opened my pension statement without permission, made assumptions about my financial situation, and told me to leave your home because I was a burden. You made it very clear that I was not family in any meaningful sense. I was an inconvenient obligation you were done tolerating. So no, you don't get to play the family card now that it's convenient. I was wrong. I've already admitted that. You admitted it after you found out I owned the building, after you realized I had power you hadn't known about. That's not genuine remorse, Jason. That's strategic apology. He stood there breathing hard, his fists clenched, looking like he wanted to hit something or scream or break down entirely. What do you want from me? He finally asked, his voice breaking. What will it take for you to forgive me? Time, I said. It'll take time for you to demonstrate that you've actually learned something from this, That you've changed how you view people, how you measure worth, how you treat family. Words are cheap, Jason. What matters is what you do going forward. And in the meantime, you're going to make us struggle? You're not struggling. You're stressed. There's a difference. Struggling is wondering if you can afford food or rent. Stressed is figuring out how to rearrange your lifestyle to accommodate a market rate expense. You'll be fine. You'll just have to make choices. He left the kitchen without another word, slamming his bedroom door hard enough to shake the walls. Amanda tried a different approach the next day. She waited until Jason was at work, then came to find me in the living room where I was reading. Frank, can we talk? Just you and me? Of course. She sat down across from me, her pregnant belly prominent, her hands folded over it protectively. The gesture was calculated, I realized. Reminding me of the grandchild, using her pregnancy as leverage. I want to apologize, she began, for how we treated you, for how I treated you. I was dismissive and unkind. I made assumptions I shouldn't have. I failed to see you clearly, and I'm genuinely sorry. It sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced the speech, refined it, prepared it specifically to manipulate me into softening. I appreciate that, Amanda. I want you to know that I respect what you've built. 37 rental units. That's incredible. That takes vision and discipline and all sorts of qualities I clearly didn't see in you. I was wrong about you, Frank. Completely wrong. Okay. And I know Jason was wrong too. He knows it now. He's been beating himself up about how he spoke to you, what he assumed about you. He's genuinely remorseful. Is he? Or is he remorseful that his assumptions turned out to be expensive? She blinked, clearly not expecting that question. I think he's genuinely sorry. He loves you, Frank. He's just not good at showing it. Love without respect isn't really love, Amanda. It's just proximity and obligation. I understand that, and I promise you, we do respect you now. We see you differently. We value you differently. You respect my money, I said gently but firmly. That's not the same as respecting me. That's not fair, isn't it? Before you knew about the properties, I was dead weight. After you found out, suddenly I'm worthy of respect and apologies and careful manipulation. My character didn't change, Amanda. My financial status became visible, and that's what changed how you treat me. She looked away, tears forming in her eyes. Another calculated move, or maybe genuine emotion. With Amanda, it was always hard to tell. Please, Frank, please think about your grandchild. Do you really want them growing up in a home where their parents are constantly stressed about money? Where we can't afford nice things, where we're cutting corners and struggling? You won't be struggling. You'll be living within your means like most people do. And honestly, Amanda, I think it'll be good for your child to grow up seeing their parents make thoughtful choices about money rather than spending freely on wants disguised as needs. You're being cruel. I'm being a landlord. For the first time, I'm treating you like any other tenant instead of like family who gets special treatment. And you don't like it because you're realizing how much my generosity was worth. We'll have to move, she said, the tears falling now. We're already looking at other apartments. Everything comparable is the same price or more expensive. If we want to pay less, we have to downsize significantly or move to worse neighborhoods. Those are valid options. Frank, please, I'm begging you. I'm 8 months pregnant. We're about to have a baby. This is the worst possible timing for financial stress and moving and all this chaos. Can't you have some compassion? I have plenty of compassion, Amanda. What I don't have anymore is tolerance for being taken for granted. You and Jason made choices that led here. I'm not responsible for fixing those choices. She stood up awkwardly, her pregnancy making the movement difficult. You're going to regret this, she said, her voice cold now that manipulation hadn't worked. You're going to miss out on your grandchild's life. You're going to be alone, wondering why your son doesn't call, why you never see your grandchildren. And it'll be because you chose pride over family. Or it'll be because my son chose to cut me out rather than accept responsibility for his actions. Either way, that'll be his choice, not mine. I'm not the one who started this, Amanda. I'm just the one who's declining to pretend it didn't happen. She left then, and I heard her crying in the bedroom, heard Jason come home early from work, heard their muffled conversation through the walls. That evening, Jason came to my room one final time. He didn't knock, just opened the door and stood in the doorway looking defeated. We're moving out, he said flatly. We found a place, 2-bedroom in Riverside Heights. It's not as nice, farther from our jobs, but it's $2,400 a month. We can afford that with our actual budget. When are you leaving? 2 weeks. We signed the lease today. We'll be out before the rent increase takes effect so you can keep your $1,100 monthly increase for whoever moves in next. Jason. No, Dad. You don't get to say anything else. You've made your point, you've taught your lesson, you've shown us what happens when we underestimate you. Message received loud and clear. Is that really what you think this is about? Teaching lessons? What else could it be about? You're punishing us for disrespecting you. You're using your money and your power to hurt us because we hurt you. That's revenge, Dad. Don't dress it up as life lessons or tough love or whatever rationalization helps you sleep at night. If that's what you believe, then you still haven't learned anything. Yeah? Well, maybe I don't want to learn your lessons anymore. Maybe I'm done trying to live up to whatever standard you've set. Maybe I'm done having a father who cares more about proving points than about his own family's well-being. You're projecting, Jason. You're the one who decided I wasn't worth basic respect because of a pension statement. You're the one who demanded I leave because I was a burden. You're the one who opened my private mail and made cruel assumptions. I'm just declining to keep subsidizing someone who treats me that way. Fine. Then we're done. We'll move out, pay our own way, build our own life without your secret empire and your hidden generosity and your silent judgment. We don't need you. Maybe you don't, but someday you might realize what you lost when you decided money was more important than character. He turned and left, closing the door with deliberate softness that was somehow worse than slamming it. 2 days later, I woke to the sounds of packing, boxes being sealed, furniture being disassembled, Jason and Amanda methodically dismantling their life in my building, preparing to leave not just the apartment, but any relationship with me. I spent that day away from the apartment, giving them space to pack without my presence making everything more uncomfortable. When I returned that evening, half their belongings were already boxed up, their living room transformed into a warehouse of cardboard and packing tape. "Dad," Jason said when he saw me, not warm, not cold, just acknowledging my presence. "We're having the movers come Thursday. We'll be completely out by Friday." "All right. I assume you'll want to inspect the apartment before we leave, make sure we didn't damage anything." "That's standard procedure, yes, but I trust you maintained it well." "We did. We were good tenants, even if we weren't good family." The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. The next few days passed in tense silence. Jason and Amanda packed. I stayed out of their way. We spoke only when necessary, polite strangers sharing a space temporarily. Amanda went into labor on Wednesday evening, 3 weeks early, probably triggered by stress. Jason rushed her to the hospital, texted me a brief update. "Baby coming at St. Mary's." I sat in the apartment wondering if I should go to the hospital, if I'd be welcome, if this crisis would bridge the gap between us or widen it further. I decided to wait, to let them have this moment without the complication of my presence. Lily was born at 2:47 a.m. Thursday morning, 6 pounds, 4 ounces, healthy despite being early. Jason sent a photo, a tiny red face, eyes closed, wrapped in hospital blankets. "She's beautiful," I texted back. "Congratulations." No response. Friday morning, the movers came as scheduled. I watched from my new apartment across town. Yes, I'd already moved out, gotten out of their way, given them space to pack without my presence looming over them. Jason and Amanda left my building with their newborn daughter, their boxes, their diminished expectations. Left the luxury apartment they'd taken for granted. Left the building owned by the father they'd dismissed. I didn't go to see them off. Didn't offer last-minute help, so just let them go, knowing that sometimes the most important lessons are learned in absence rather than presence. Jason and Amanda tried to make the new rent work for about 3 weeks. I heard through the property management company that they'd been paying on time, but were clearly struggling. The building manager reported seeing Amazon deliveries drop off significantly. The fancy organic grocery delivery service they'd used appeared to have been canceled. They lasted a month before Jason called me. "Dad, we can't do this. We're drowning. Amanda had the baby 2 weeks ago, and we're overwhelmed. The rent is killing us. We need help." "What kind of help?" "Financial help. Can you reduce our rent back to what it was? Or at least meet us halfway? Maybe $2,700 instead of $3,300? "No." "Dad, please. I'm asking as your son, as the father of your grandchild. Lily, your granddaughter, please don't let your pride hurt her future." "Jason, you told me my $1,200 pension couldn't buy groceries. You called me dead weight. You demanded I leave your home because I was a burden. And now you want me to reduce your rent because you're struggling financially? Do you see the irony?" "I was wrong, okay? I've admitted that. I apologized. What more do you want?" "I want you to learn what things actually cost. I want you to understand what it means to live without subsidies you never acknowledged. I want you to grow up, Jason." "So you're just going to let us suffer?" "No. I'm going to let you make choices. downsize your apartment, cut unnecessary expenses, learn to budget, live like adults who don't have a father secretly making their life easier. "We're going to have to move," he said quietly. "We've been looking. We can't find anything comparable for less money. Everything is this expensive or more." "Then find something not comparable. Find something smaller or farther from downtown or less updated. There are options, Jason. You just don't like them because they feel like downgrades. They are downgrades. Compared to what you've been living, yes. But compared to what most young families can actually afford, they're probably appropriate. You've been living above your means for so long you've forgotten what your actual means are." There was a long silence. Then, "I can't believe you're doing this. My own father, watching us struggle, refusing to help. I can't believe you're asking, after everything you said, after how you treated me, after you made it crystal clear I was a burden you wanted gone. Now you want that burden back because it came with benefits you didn't appreciate until they were gone." He hung up without saying goodbye. 2 weeks later, I received notice from the property management company that Jason and Amanda were vacating Unit 12. They'd given proper 30-day notice, would be out by the end of the month, expected their full security deposit to be returned since they'd maintained the property well. I approved everything, released their security deposit in full, listed Unit 12 at $3,400 per month, even higher than what Jason had been paying. It rented within a week to a young couple who were thrilled to find such a nice place. I went to see Jason and Amanda one last time on their moving day. Not to help, I'd learned that lesson. Just to witness, to see what my choices had wrought. They were loading the last boxes into a U-Haul truck, both looking exhausted. Amanda carried Lily in a wrap, the baby sleeping peacefully against her chest. Jason's face was drawn, older than his 34 years, marked by stress and sleepless nights and the reality of adult responsibility without a safety net. "Need any help?" I asked, knowing the answer. Jason looked at me with something between resentment and resignation. "Little late for that, isn't it?" I meant with the physical moving. I can carry boxes. "We're fine. We're almost done anyway." I stood there watching them work, feeling the gulf between us. This man was my son, but we'd become strangers, connected by blood but separated by a fundamental disagreement about what family meant, what respect looked like, what obligations existed between parents and children. "Your new place?" I said. "Where is it?" "Riverside Heights, 2-bedroom, older building, smaller apartment, farther from work. But it's $2,400 a month and we can manage that." "That's good." "Is it?" "Because it feels like a massive downgrade from what we had, from what we could have kept having if you weren't so intent on punishing us." "I'm not punishing you, Jason. How many times do I need to say that? I'm removing a subsidy. There's a difference." "Not from where I'm standing." Amanda spoke up for the first time, her voice tired. "Frank, I want you to know something. Whatever happens between you and Jason, I'm not going to keep Lily from you. You're her grandfather. You have a right to know her, and she has a right to know you." "Thank you, Amanda. That means a lot. But I'm also not going to pretend what you did was okay. You had the power to help us, and you chose not to. You had the power to make our lives easier during one of the most stressful times. New baby, new parents, all of it. And you chose to make it harder instead. That's a choice you'll have to live with. And you'll have to live with the choices you made that led here. The assumptions, the disrespect, the way you treated someone who'd been quietly helping you for years. Those were your choices." Jason slammed the truck door closed with more force than necessary. "We get it, Dad. We were wrong. We were cruel. We underestimated you. Message received. Now you get to be right, and we get to be punished, and everyone learns their lessons." "Happy?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm not happy. I'm sad. Sad that it came to this. Sad that you couldn't see my value until you lost my support. Sad that our relationship has deteriorated to this point. But I'm at peace with my choices because they came from a place of self-respect, not revenge." "You keep telling yourself that," Jason said bitterly. He climbed into the truck, started the engine. Amanda gave me one last look, complicated, unreadable, before climbing into the passenger seat with Lily. They drove away, leaving behind the luxury apartment they'd taken for granted, leaving behind the building owned by the father they'd dismissed, heading toward a smaller life in a more modest neighborhood, carrying the weight of lessons learned too late. I stood in the parking lot watching them disappear, then went back inside to Unit 12. It was empty now, cleaned and ready for the new tenants who would move in next week. The couple who would pay $3,400 monthly without complaint, who would appreciate what they had, who would treat their landlord with basic respect because that's what decent people do. I walked through the rooms one last time. The living room where Jason and Amanda had entertained, the kitchen where we'd had that final breakfast before everything changed, the bedroom where Lily had been born 3 weeks early because stress can trigger labor, and I felt nothing but quiet certainty that I'd made the right choice. Hard choice, painful choice, but right choice. Because sometimes love means letting people experience the full weight of their actions. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is step back and let consequences be the teacher you can never be. Jason and I don't have much of a relationship now. We're cordial when we see each other at family events. Christmas, Thanksgiving, the baby's first birthday. We exchange pleasantries, keep conversations superficial, maintain a polite distance. He never apologized again after that first desperate phone call. Amanda occasionally reaches out, sends photos of the baby, tries to maintain some connection between grandfather and grandchild. I appreciate her efforts. I met my granddaughter Lily when she was 3 months old. She's beautiful, perfect, completely unaware of the complicated dynamics between the adults in her life. I've set up a trust fund for her education, separate from anything Jason can access. She'll have opportunities, even if her father is too proud to accept help from me. Jason and Amanda are still in their cheaper apartment. According to Amanda's occasional updates, they're managing financially, but it's tight. They've had to make the changes I suggested. Less eating out, fewer unnecessary purchases, living within their actual means rather than aspirational means. Amanda says it's been good for them, ultimately. Forced them to be more intentional about spending, more grateful for what they have. She's even started a side business doing freelance graphic design to help with income. Jason apparently blames me for their financial stress, tells people that his father owns the building he used to live in and kicked him out over a family dispute. The story he tells makes me the villain, which I suppose is easier than admitting he called his father dead weight and paid the price for that cruelty. I don't correct the narrative. People believe what they want to believe. Unit 12 at the Riverside Complex is doing well. The new tenants are delightful. A young doctor and her teacher husband, both respectful and appreciative. They pay $3,400 monthly without complaint, take excellent care of the apartment, and have never once made me regret renting to them. Sometimes I drive by Jason's new apartment building, not one I own, thankfully. It's fine. Not as nice as the Riverside Complex, but adequate. Safe neighborhood, good schools nearby for when Lily is older. They'll be okay there. I sold my other properties this year. At 72, I decided I didn't want the stress of property management anymore, even with a company handling the day-to-day operations. I liquidated the portfolio for just over $13 million, paid the capital gains taxes, and invested the remainder conservatively. I live comfortably now in a nice senior living community, independent living, but with the security of knowing assistance is available if I need it as I age. My apartment is paid for in full. My monthly expenses are covered several times over by investment income and pension combined. I'm not lonely. I've made friends here, joined some clubs, volunteer at the library 3 days a week. I have lunch with Tom Chen occasionally, who still finds the whole situation darkly amusing. The pension statement that cost your son 1 to 100 a month, he calls it. Margaret would have had opinions about all of this. She was always the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found compromises. But she also understood consequences. She'd raised Jason with the same philosophy I had. Respect matters, character matters, how you treat people matters. I think she would have understood why I did what I did, even if she might have done it differently. The hardest part isn't the distance from Jason. It's missing moments with Lily. Missing bedtime stories and playground visits, and all the small ways grandparents bond with grandchildren. Amanda sends photos and videos, which I treasure, but it's not the same. Last month, Jason sent me a text. Just 3 words. I get it now. I don't know what prompted it. Don't know if he really does understand or if he just thinks he does. I texted back, I hope you do. He didn't respond after that. But the fact that he reached out at all suggests something has shifted. Maybe parenthood has given him perspective on sacrifice and unconditional love and the complicated dynamics between parents and children. Maybe he's starting to realize that his father's cruelty was actually the hardest kind of love, the kind that lets you fail, lets you struggle, lets you learn through consequences rather than always rescuing you from your mistakes. Or maybe not. Maybe he just wanted to send 3 words into the void and see if I'd respond. Either way, I'm here. Living my life, comfortable in my choices, at peace with the decisions I made. I'm not dead weight, I'm not a burden, I'm not worthless. I'm a father who taught his son the most expensive lesson he'll ever learn. Respect isn't optional, and family isn't an excuse for cruelty. The pension statement still exists somewhere in Jason's possessions, probably shoved in a drawer, a reminder of the day he made the worst assumptions of his life. $200 a month that he thought couldn't buy groceries. y several $100 a month that he couldn't afford to lose. The irony is almost poetic.